Hi students, and welcome to lesson 3 for unit 4. Today we are going to actually start with the summary, and I'm going to start with the summary to kind of give you an overall picture of what we're going to be learning in this lesson, and then we're going to jump back up to the beginning of the lesson. So earlier in our lessons, we've looked at how to solve equations, and we've talked about what it looks like for a one-step equation to be solved. And then yesterday, you got to see the video on working with hangers and keeping the hangers balanced. And if you didn't notice at the time, those hangers really represent math equations. And you may have figured that out and been one step ahead of the curriculum here. But basically, anytime we had one of those hangers, we were dealing with an equation. And so if you remember from our hangers, we had to take the same amount of, or we had to make the same change to both sides of the hanger in order to keep them balanced. Well, in math, we don't typically model everything with hangers. We typically use numbers and symbols. And those numbers look like this, and those symbols look like this. And a lot of times, the word we use for a symbol is a variable. So we have variables such as x, y, and z, which are commonly used, but really it can be any letter or symbol can stand in for a variable. So when we have equations like this one, we could represent this with a hanger. This would be, I like to read this as 4x's plus 9 equals negative 2x's minus 3. So we could represent this with a hanger. Our x's could maybe be the squares, our 9 could maybe be the triangles, and we could model this out as a hanger. But that takes a lot of time, and in math, we're always looking for the most efficient way possible to solve the problem. And so what we're going to look at today is how to solve equations just by using the numbers and the variables and not necessarily connecting it to a hanger. So with that being said, scroll back up or turn your page to the first part of this lesson where you see the lesson name and then section 3.1 with matching hangers. That's where we're going to start. And we're going to take a look at these hangers and kind of match them to one of these equations below. And we're going to do the first one together. So I'm going to help you find this first equation. And then I want to see if you can find what B, C, and D would be. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to grab this picture and put it into our notepad. Make sure that you have a pencil and your book next to you ready to go for this lesson that we're going to do together. And here we go. So we're going to look at these matching hangers or this hanger question. And the first thing we need to do is kind of figure out what is over here on these left and right sides of each one of these hangers. So I have two squares. So for this one, I'm going to actually just write the pieces that I'm working on for A. I'm going to write over here. So I have two squares, and I'm going to use an S just so I can keep track of everything. Two squares. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 triangles, and that's 6T. And then I have two circles. Okay, so I'm going to look for something that has a 2, a 6, and a 2 in it, and specifically on the left-hand side. And I don't see anything. So now I'm going to see if I can find any groups. So I'm going to say I have one group of a square and 3 triangles, and another group of a square and 3 triangles. So a square and 3 triangles is going to be written like this. One square, which we can just write as an S, plus 3 triangles. 3 triangles. I'm going to try to make that like a fancy T, so that way we don't have to worry about whether or not that's a plus sign. So I've got this group, and I have 2 of them. So I have 2 groups of a square and 3 triangles. Do I see anything down here with 2 groups? Oh, I do. I see this one and this one. These both have 2 groups of 3, or like of something plus something else. So now I see that this X is going to be my square, and the Y is going to be my triangle, which is helpful. And now I need to figure out which one, this first one or the third one, matches the right-hand side. Well, on the right-hand side, what do we have? Now that we know that squares are x's, I can say I have 4 x's, and I have y's were triangles, so I had 2 y's, and that must mean that z's are circles, so then I also have 2 z's. So which one, the first one or the third one, has this section on the right and this section on the left? Well, it's this one. So this one, and that's a really bad circle job here, this one goes with hanger A. So now go ahead and see if you can figure out which ones go with B, C, and D. And D is going to be quite simple if you get down to D. D will be simple. So then use process of elimination to see if you can find B and C. Pause the video now for at least 2 minutes and think about that, and then come back for the answer. All right, I'm trusting that you went ahead and paused the video. So we need to find out which one B is. Well, B doesn't have any Z's in it. So we need to look for the one that doesn't have any Z's, or that got rid of 2 Z's. But look, it still has the 2 groups. It has this group here and this group here. So we need the groups on the left. So it looks like this first one is going to go with B. And then we can look at D if we'd like, and we can see that there's 2 triangles, which are our y's. So that would be 2y, and there'd be 1x. So that means this one is D, which automatically means this last one is C. And I know there are a lot of lines all over the screen that can be a little confusing. So feel free to rewatch that portion of the lesson. And then go ahead and write your answers. Rewrite those equations, A, B, C, and D. Transfer them from here to this section. Pause the video now while you do that, and then come back to answer question 2 on your own. Hopefully you were able to identify question 2 where it said X, Y, and Z, because we already talked about it. But for A, B, C, and D, it's asking, or I'm sorry, for question 3, it's saying explain what was done to each equation to create the next equation. Well, if you take a look at the 4 equations that you wrote down, first you can see you subtracted 2 z's. Then getting from B to C is actually really tricky to think about. They essentially divided everything in half. So they took half away from this side and they took half away from this side. So that's why there's 2 squares and a triangle left. And then the last step, let's see, what did they do? They took away 1 square from each side and 1 triangle from each side, and that resulted, yeah, that's what they did. They took away 1 square from each side and 1 triangle from each side, and that resulted in the D equation. All right, we are going to move on to part 3.2, but since you are watching this video at home and do not have partners to work with necessarily, I'm going to display these cards that they're talking about on the screen. And then we'll talk about them and do this activity kind of out loud together. There's not going to be anything that you're going to write down. We're not going to do number 2. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the first card. Our first card would have had this on it. So this would have been on one piece of paper, just like this, if we were in class together. Okay, so what they're wanting us to do is find out, how did this equation change to this equation? How did we get from here to here? So let's take a look. First of all, I notice at the top that I have some variables, and I'm going to go ahead and circle those in red because I like circling like terms in the same color. I've got some variables. And then I have some standard numbers. I'm going to circle right here in this bluish purple color. Okay, so what I've done is I've kind of just labeled my like terms, and I've looked to see, okay, what changed from this first equation to the second equation? Well, I still have the 7. The 7 didn't change, so I know that I didn't do anything to the 7. But I don't have a 3x over here, and I only have a 2x over here. So what happened to this 3x? Where did it go? Maybe you're saying, well, if you take away the 3x over here, you'd have to take away 3x's over here. And 5x's take away 3x's would leave you with 2x's. And that's how we did it. So I think it's called, what was this called? Matching equation moves, matching moves. The move that happened was we took away 3x's. That's what happened from this equation to this equation. Okay, let's look at the next card. All right, here's our next card. I outlined it in red for us. We have negative 3 times 4x minus 3 equals negative 15. And that changed into 4x minus 3 equals 5. Okay, so what happened between this first equation and this second equation? What happened to change this one to this one? What happened? Well, let's look to see what's the same. We still have the 4x, we still have a 3. They're both still negative, or the 3 is negative, the 4 is still positive. And that's all that's the same. So something happened with this 3 and this 15. Can you tell what it was? What happened to change this negative 15 into a positive 5? And what happened to get rid of this negative 3? It's missing over here. If we add 3, because the opposite of subtraction is addition, if we add 3 to both sides, that changes this to a negative 12, not a 5. What could we do to get rid of this negative 3 that's being multiplied by this term right here? Hopefully you said the opposite of multiplication is division. And so you can divide this whole piece by negative 3 and then divide the 15 by negative 3, and that changes this to a 5. So what happened between these two equations is we divided by negative 3. All right, so hopefully from that activity you could see that there's different operations that we can do from, as long as we do them to both sides of the equation, to simplify or to get a new equation that results in a new equation. And that's really helpful for us when we're solving math problems. So with this one, we had to subtract 3x in order to get to this simplified equation right here. With this one, we've got parentheses and a number on the outside of the parentheses. We needed to do some math in order to simplify that and get it to be something a little more manageable. So now that we have the understanding of whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other side, let's take a look at part 3.3, where it's talking about Noah and Lynn solving this equation. So we have the equation 14a equals 2 times a minus 3. I'm going to throw that into our chart over here, or our notes over here. And let's take a look at it. So the question in your book is asking you, it's showing you how Noah solved this and how Lynn solved this, and it's asking if we agree with them. So first I want to talk about how we would solve this. So first we can see that we have a's on both sides. So we can simplify this by dividing this whole thing by 2. Because right now this 2 is being multiplied by the value of a minus 3. So we can divide this by 2, and whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. So we're going to divide this by 2. So 14a's divided by 2 is only going to leave us with 7a's. Picture those hangers again. If you have a hanger, those hangers in your mind, you've got 14 of one, and you're going to split it in half. Now you have 7 of them. Okay, so 7a is going to equal, well, 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so we don't have to write that. So it's just going to equal a minus 3. And now we have a simplified equation. This is a subtraction sign. And we can say, okay, well, what do I need to do? I've got an a over here and 7 a's over here. Well, I can get rid of this a and also get rid of one of the a's over here. So that changes it to 6a. So 6a's is going to equal negative 3. Don't forget about that subtraction sign there, negative 3. Well, if I have 6a's and I need to find the value of 1, I just need to divide by 6. If I divide both sides by 6, that gives me a equals negative 1/2. Now, I am out of my 15-minute maximum recording time here, So I'm going to go ahead and make a second video. So go ahead and go to Canvas and find that second video so we can wrap up this lesson.